The Hudson River was black as ink at 2:03 a.m., reflecting nothing but the thin, ragged shimmer of faraway city lights. Malcolm D. Vail, founder and CEO of Vail Systems, a fintech cybersecurity empire valued at $4.3 billion, came to just in time to understand he was drowning. His wrists were tied behind his back. His ankles were cinched together. He was sinking. The last thing he remembered, leaving the charity gala at Riverside Manor, cutting through the private lot toward his car. Someone said his name. He turned. Then, blankness, until the shock of cold flooded his lungs and snapped him into a waking nightmare. Malcolm thrashed, panic tearing through him. The rope bit skin. The surface, wavy and distant, felt impossibly far. His Tom Ford suit ballooned and dragged like wet lead, hauling him down. So this is it, he thought with a terrifying, precise calm. Thrown into a river like garbage. He kicked anyway. The burn in his chest became a siren. Darkness crowded the edges of his vision. He stopped fighting, just for a heartbeat, letting the heavy water close over the thought of breath. Arms seized him. They locked across his chest with startling strength and drove upward, cutting through the cold. His face broke the surface and he exploded into coughing. River, air, river, while whoever held him powered for shore with urgent, practiced strokes. "Stay with me," a woman's voice commanded, breath ragged, tone unyielding. "Don't you dare!" Stone scraped his side. Hands worked at knots. Fast, efficient, desperate. The bindings at his wrists slipped free. The rope at his ankles followed. She rolled him onto his left side and hammered his back until he choked up more water. "Breathe," she ordered. "There you go. Breathe." His vision steadied enough to find his rescuer. Late 20s, blonde hair plastered to her face, a simple dress soaked through and clinging, blue eyes bright with a mix of terror and resolve. "Who?" he rasped. "Don't talk," she said, yanking a phone free with shaking fingers. "This is Evelyn Hart calling 911. I just pulled a man from the Hudson near Riverside Manor. His hands and feet were bound. He's breathing, but he needs an ambulance and police now." She rattled off the cross streets as if she'd memorized them. While she gave the details, Malcolm's mind sprinted past shock toward the only conclusion that fit. This wasn't random. The timing, the dock, the restraints. Someone had decided to erase him cleanly. "The ambulance is coming," Evelyn said, shrugging off a thin jacket and wrapping it around his shoulders. The fabric was soaked, but the gesture warmed. "You're in shock. Stay still." "You saved me," he managed, voice torn raw. "I heard the splash," she said simply. "I didn't think. I jumped." Sirens swelled, first distant, then near, spinning red and blue along the slick stones. EMTs barreled down the path with a backboard. Police lights fractured on the river's skin. Hands lifted him. An oxygen mask descended. Someone shouted his blood pressure. Someone else called out a temperature reading that made the word hypothermia buzz like neon. When they loaded him into the ambulance, Malcolm gripped for something solid and found Evelyn's hand. "Don't leave," he rasped, absurdly afraid that if she stepped away, he'd slide backward into the dark again. "I won't," she said, climbing in after the EMTs before anyone could question it. "I'm right here." Mercy General's VIP floor had the quiet of money, padded doors, matte artwork, lighting that suggested dawn even at midnight. After warmed fluids, oxygen, a tangle of IVs, and a harrowing half-hour of coughing up what felt like the river itself, Malcolm lay propped against crisp pillows, teeth no longer chattering, chest aching with a deep bruised hurt. The first visitor to break the hush was his sister Nia. At 32, Nia Vail wore CFO-like armor and mission both. She crossed the room in 3 efficient strides, grabbed his hand with both of hers, and only then let her eyes brim. "They said you almost—" Her voice failed, recovered. "You almost died." "I did," he said hoarsely. He tried for a wry smile. It frayed at the edges. "She brought me back." Nia followed his glance to the corner, where Evelyn sat in an unobtrusive chair, hair now braided into a damp rope, a gray hospital blanket over borrowed scrubs. She rose, awkward and polite. "I can wait outside." "Stay," Malcolm said, more urgent than he meant to sound. Nia's look was quick. assessing, in a softer tone. Ms. Hart, I'm Nia. Thank you. You don't have to, Evelyn began. We do, Nia said, a precision of gratitude. We absolutely do. The door opened again, admitting Rafael Cortez, co-founder, partner, 15 years in the same trenches, his tailored jacket hanging off his tall, tense frame. He took in the IVs, the oxygen cannula, the faint river stain still clinging to Malcolm's hairline, and went a shade of furious only the faithful can carry. Who did this? He demanded, as if the question had a room number. We're going to find out, Nia said, with counsel and security present. Security is already here, said a cool voice. Yara Kim, head of executive protection, stepped in with a tablet and a face like a locked vault. We swept the floor in the hospital's surveillance. Entry is tight, but this... She didn't finish, didn't indulge in the obvious failure. This is on me, Malcolm said, because it was. I waved off the detail, wanted to just get home. He closed his eyes, embarrassment tasting like iron. I was arrogant. Yara inclined her head, acknowledgement without absolution. Arrogance is a data point. We update protocols. Behind her came Detective Aaron Keene, the tired Irish set of his jaw offset by a gaze that worked like a pry bar. Mr. Vale, he said, flipping a notebook open but not looking down at it. I need the shape of your night. Malcolm's account was clean until it slid off a cliff. Gala, speech, private lot, a voice saying Malcolm from his left, a hit behind the ear like a small car wreck, cold water exploding his lungs, ropes, black water spinning blacker. Could you place the voice? Keene asked. Accent? Height? Familiarity? Male, deep, not faked, but maybe damped down. Familiar enough to make me turn. Malcolm frowned. My brain keeps trying to assign it a face and fails. We'll fill the gap with footage, Keene said, and we'll need your last 3 months of comms, business and personal, and your travel logs, calendar, private security patrol notes. Who knew you'd be at Riverside when you planned to leave? My office will cooperate, Nia said, within legal bounds. Keene's mouth almost twitched at the lawyerly addendum. Within legal bounds, he echoed. He turned to Yara. Get me dot camera coverage and any blind spots we already know about. We're pulling it, Yara said. Riverside's private system is conveniently offline for maintenance between midnight and 3. Keene's pen paused. That's not a coincidence. It's not, Yara agreed. Evelyn had been a quiet presence, hands folded atop the gray blanket, but now she cleared her throat, tentative. I should tell you what I heard. Keene angled toward her. Ms. Hart. I was cleaning the terrace after the guests left. I heard a splash that didn't sound like a body jumping. It sounded like something heavy thrown. I ran to the rail and saw 2 men on the dock. One tall, one broad. The tall one said, "That's billions down the drain." Literally. She winced like repeating it might stain her mouth. Then they walked away, fast. I didn't think. I jumped. Keene's pen moved again. You didn't see faces. It was too dark, and they kept their heads low. Footwear? He asked, surprising them all. Dark, not dress shoes. Looked like soft soles, sneakers or boots. Keene nodded as if this fit a pattern he wasn't ready to share. Thank you, Ms. Hart. You saved his life. She looked uncomfortable, as if the word hero might get her fired. Anyone would have. No, Keene said, simple and flat. They wouldn't. The door swung a third time, riding a gust of perfume and resolve. Althea Vale, 66, elegance like a birthright, eyes like hard wind, crossed to her son, cupped his face in her hands and breathed one relieved, ragged sound. My boy, she said, and for a moment the room hummed at a frequency from another life. Newark apartment, late notices stacked like playing cards, a mother refusing to fold. She turned to Evelyn without prompting. Now who is this angel? Althea, Malcolm tried, but his mother was already moving. Evelyn attempted a bow that became a shiver. Ma'am, You saved my son, Althea said, taking both of Evelyn's hands, warm and dry against Evelyn's cold ones. If you are hungry, you are fed. If you are cold, you are clothed. If anybody in this city troubles you, they will meet me first. Do you hear? Evelyn's laugh startled itself out of her. Yes, ma'am. Althea softened. thumb brushing Evelyn's knuckles, a coronation in miniature. Good. Keene closed his notebook. I'll be back once we have doc footage and a better read on Riverside's maintenance. In the meantime, Mr. Vale, try not to die. Bad for my clearance rate. Working on it, Malcolm said. After they left, Keene, Yara, Raphael to coordinate the countermove, Althea to make phone calls that parted the sea, Nia to bully a stack of lawyers into speed. Quiet pooled again. The monitors ticked their green approval. The city glittered beyond the glass, as if it hadn't nearly swallowed him. Evelyn stood. I should go. I have to tell my supervisor what happened. And there's laundry at the manor that won't fold itself. Malcolm's chest pulled in a way unrelated to cold. You'll come back? She hesitated, then nodded. If they let me past your guards. A small, lopsided smile. They've searched my bag 3 times already. They think in worst-case scenarios, he said. Tonight, worst case nearly won. Evelyn stepped closer to the bed, suddenly unsure where to put her hands. She settled for the blanket edge. My dad always said, if you can help, you help. He was Coast Guard. He used to bring home stories. He hated the ones with endings like, she didn't finish, didn't need to. He'd be proud of what you did, Malcolm said. She swallowed. I hope so. Will you give me your number? The question came out unpolished, too fast, wearing all its sincerity. Not for optics. Tonight is a blur, and the one thing that isn't is your voice telling me to breathe. I'd like to thank you when my insides don't feel like sandpaper. She recited digits. He repeated them, committing them by the stubborn habit that had once helped him memorize code before he could afford second monitors. Naya, returning with a charger, typed the number quietly into her contacts too. You should sleep, Evelyn said. If I do, the river comes back. He tried for dry. It sounded like truth. Then don't sleep alone. She winced at her own words, cheeks coloring. I mean, would it help if I sat here and read? Out loud? My dad used to do that after bad calls. It tricked the brain. You'll get in trouble. I've been in trouble before, she said, and her mouth tilted like the sentence had too many backstories for a hospital room. I can stay an hour. He nodded, relief this physical thing in his shoulders. Okay. She dragged the chair closer, curled into it, and lifted the paperback. Her voice wasn't theatrical. It was steady and clean. The mystery on those pages had a villain and clues, a finish line that promised explanation. Malcolm let the cadence wash over him, the hum of machines blending into a softer tide. His mind ticked through probabilities, lists of names that could become enemies if you tilted your head. He let the lists drift. Her voice built a raft. Twice he startled awake to river memories, the cold hand on his throat, and twice her voice was there, mid-sentence, not pausing, like oxygen, like proof. The second time his hand found the blanket edge, where hers rested. She didn't pull away. They sat like that, unremarkable and more intimate than touch that meant something else, the night slowly uncoiling around them. Near dawn, Detective Keene returned with a grim face and a file folder that looked heavier than paper. We have our likely hands, he said by way of greeting. Marcus Webb and Trevor Ellis, hired muscle with a reputation for creative pressure. Guess where we found them? Malcolm's mouth flattened. Dead. Shot in the head in a Brooklyn warehouse, Keene confirmed. Someone paid for a job and then paid for silence. We're chasing the money through 3 shells and an offshore bank that thinks subpoenas are party invitations to ignore. Nia's jaw tightened. So the people who pushed my brother are dead, and the ones who hired them are ghosts? For now, Keene said. He looked at Malcolm. We're widening the circle. I'll need full access to partner comms, major competitor moves, and, this is the part everybody hates, family. My family wouldn't, Malcolm started, then stopped. There were things you could swear to and things you couldn't. Look at everyone, he said instead. No sacred cows. Keene nodded once. That makes my job easier and your holidays worse. He closed the folder. Try to be boring today. When the door clicked shut, the silence that followed was different, edged with the shape of a larger hunt. Malcolm felt his ribs ache around his heartbeat, a cage around a drum. He looked at the woman in the chair, at the way exhaustion had finally lowered her eyelids between paragraphs. The book drooped, then steadied as she rallied. "You don't have to stay," he said. "I know," she murmured. The words fuzzed with sleep and stubbornness. "I said I would." He considered all the rooms he'd walked into where people stood because of what he could sign or build or break. He considered the dock, the rope, the black. He considered a maid with Coast Guard training who didn't hesitate. "Evelyn," he said, his voice finding her name like a handhold. "I'm not sure what I owe you that can be measured." Her eyes opened, blue and clear even in fatigue. "You don't owe me," she said. "Just breathe." He breathed. For the first time since the water closed over his head, the act felt like a decision he was allowed to keep making. Outside, the city peeled itself into mourning. Inside, a billionaire who had almost been a body and a maid who refused to let the river keep him shared a small, stubborn quiet. Somewhere between the machine's patient beeping and the soft turn of a page, the next part of the story began, not with a headline, not with a press release, but with two people in a too-bright room choosing to believe each other. And far downriver, where the current smoothed and the lights thinned, the water kept its secrets, for now. By late afternoon, the monitors surrendered their argument that Malcolm's body might forget how to live. He was stable, cranky, sore everywhere. Keene came and went like a tide. Yara installed a second team outside the door and assigned code names to his visitors as if a battlefield had sprung up in a hospital corridor. Althea fielded calls from half the city, answering only the ones where power and love intersected. Nia turned legal frameworks into knives. Evelyn stayed. She didn't hover. She tidied what the nurses didn't have time to tidy, wheeled the flowers to the edge of the room, snagged a fugitive drip of saline from the floor like she'd been born to keep spaces from unraveling. She read the mystery aloud until he drifted, then read quietly so that waking would feel like stepping into a story rather than out of a nightmare. Every few hours she would stand, stretch, and stare out at the skyline as if taking attendance of the city, lights, bridges, boats, and then sit again because they had silently agreed that he would not wake alone. On day 2, Malcolm's voice came back enough to make trouble. "Tell me about you," he said, closing his laptop after a futile attempt to scan a board memo. Evelyn hesitated, as if the floor might give way if she stepped onto it. "There's not that much to tell." "There's always that much to tell." She chewed the inside of her cheek. "Upstate, 2-stoplight town. My dad taught boating safety in the summers and ran a hardware store the rest of the year. Mom waitressed. I learned to clean a rental in an hour and to tell a lie by the way a person avoided looking at a bill. Dad died 3 years ago. Heart. I came down here because grief makes small towns mean sometimes, and because rent in the city costs what a house used to, and I thought if I worked enough hours, I could outrun the empty parts." "You like mysteries because there's always an answer," Malcolm said. She smiled, one shoulder lifting. "And because the brave people keep digging even when it hurts." He thought of the dock. "You're brave." "I jumped," she said, "as if we are what we do and not what we fear." Yara knocked and entered with a tablet and a look that meant, "Don't shoot the messenger. I already shot the first one." We traced the phone that pinged the maintenance outage at Riverside's cameras. Burn phone. Purchased in cash. Kensington Avenue, Newark. It was used once, then dumped in a storm drain. But the timing tells us something. The outage began 20 minutes before you left the gala and ended 4 minutes after the splash. She angled the tablet to show the timeline. This was clockwork. "Who had the gala's run of show?" Nia asked from the doorway, already opening a file. "Besides us." "The event planner," Yara said. "Riverside Manor admin. Vale Systems PR. Catering. The charity itself. People who knew he sometimes ditches the security tail after speeches," Nia added without inflection. Malcolm took the hit. "That particular bad habit is retired." "Sir," Yara said, "it's in the ground." Detective Keene returned that evening with eyes that needed sleep and didn't intend to find it. 2 bodies we mentioned, Webb and Ellis. Their shooter used a suppressor. 1 entry wound, clean exit. Whoever pulled the trigger didn't flinch and didn't miss. We also found a ledger, partial payments from a shell called Doric Bridge Holdings. Guess what Doric Bridge owns? Nothing, Nia said. It exists to own the next shell. Keene lifted a brow. Somebody's met Delaware. Nia didn't smile. We'll pierce it. You'll try, Keene said. Meanwhile, I need to widen your personal perimeter, Mr. Vale. People who know how you move. Family schedules, old friends, new friends. His gaze flicked, not unkindly, to Evelyn. She sat straighter. I met him in a river. And you saved his life, Keene said, pen already tapping the second beat of a truth. That also made you a witness. We're putting a patrol car outside your building. I live in a fourth-floor walk-up where the buzzer only works if you hit it and sweet-talk it, she said. A patrol car will double my rent from fear alone. Anorantum will handle the landlord and the neighbors, Keene said. Then to Malcolm, and until we clear Webb and Ellis's employer, I'd strongly recommend anyone close to you sleep somewhere we can control. Malcolm looked at Evelyn. He didn't couch the ask in something else. Stay here, he said. We have space. We have guards. We have locks. We barely know each other, she said. We know enough, he answered, that you jump, that I'm too proud and you're too careful, that tonight I will listen to your breathing and you will listen to mine, and neither of us will dream of rivers. She didn't answer for a long moment. Then she nodded, slight and decisive. One night, it became 3. The media learned her name on day 4. A telephoto lens caught the moment she left the hospital to bring Malcolm a clean hoodie from the bag Nia had fetched from his apartment. The shot went everywhere in minutes. A woman in hospital scrubs, hair in a cheap elastic, face bare, walking with the bone-tired posture of someone who had been refusing to go home. The caption writers did the rest, turning scarcity into scandal. Billionaire saved by Maid. Cinderella saves CEO. Gold digger or guardian angel. The comments were a genre all their own. Malcolm tried not to look. When he did, fury came like a fever. He told Yara to sue everyone. He told Nia to buy the tabloids and salt their earth. They told him to drink water. Evelyn read them, because of course she did. She swallowed the worst ones, but the residue showed around her eyes. Internet strangers don't get to tell you who you are, Malcolm said, each word deliberate. They don't, she agreed, but they get to tell my mother, and the woman who covers my Tuesday shift, and the kid at the bodega. I've spent my adult life trying not to make noise. This is a hurricane. Althea knocked and slipped in, as if she'd been listening outside long enough to know when to rescue. Child, she said to Evelyn, you are not a scandal. You are the reason my son is here to read ugly things on a bright screen. If you need noise-canceling headphones for the soul, borrow mine. She tapped her chest. Right here. Evelyn laughed despite herself, the sound immediately dissolving into a small sob she tried to swallow. Althea moved to hold her without asking permission. Let them talk, Althea murmured. They talk because they cannot do. We will do. The first time Malcolm and Evelyn left the hospital together, the building front bloomed with cameras. Yara orchestrated a path through them that felt like a short war. Photographers shouted questions with teeth in them. Malcolm kept his hand at the small of Evelyn's back and refused to look left or right. Inside the armored SUV, quiet returned not as absence but as shelter. I can go back to Riverside, Evelyn said, staring out the window at a city that wouldn't stop moving. I can call in a favor, switch to a different wing. I don't need to be in your world to have saved you. You already are in my world, he said, because you saw me as a person before the world turned me back into a headline. You don't know me, she said softly. I'm learning, he said. Start with dinner. Not a place with 3 forks, she said. Diner on 115th, he countered. Best pancakes in Manhattan, and the forks are cheap steel. She glanced at him, irreverence winning a small victory over fear. Pancakes at 6 p.m. is an act of rebellion. We could use a few. They ate pancakes with butter that melted faster than the ice in their water. Yara sat 3 tables back pretending to eat soup. 2 members of the security team pretended to be men who always stared out the window at dusk. The waitress called Evelyn Han and Malcolm's sweetheart, then remembered who he was and blushed so hard she looked feverish. Malcolm tipped like a man trying to fix a broken system with cash and awareness. In the week that followed, they built a rhythm within the bodyguard choreography. He rested, then read, then took short, guilty calls from Raphael, who reminded him gently that the company could run without him for 7 days, but would prefer to keep that a rarity. He watched Evelyn slip her entire life into a single duffel, and he hated it. the smallness of it, the way we condense women's lives into what they can carry. He bought her a robe. She refused it twice and then accepted, and he pretended not to memorize the color. On day 9, a letter came. No return address. Block type. It slid under the penthouse door like a threat that did not respect custom. Stop seeing Malcolm Vale, or you will suffer consequences. This is your only warning. Yara had the note in a bag within 30 seconds. Malcolm had Evelyn in his arms within 10. She tried not to shake. She failed. Then she stopped trying because there are times when pretended strength is disrespect to fear. They don't get to decide who you hold, Malcolm said into her hair. They don't have to decide, she said. They only have to show up once when you blink. Then we don't blink, he said. Move in. Permanently. Keys. Codes. Protection. She pulled back to look at him. You're asking me to move into a life that gets firebombed by headlines and guarded by earpieces and entered by 6-digit numbers instead of knocked on. I clean rooms for a living, Malcolm. I don't live in them. Live here, he said, hearing the plea inside the plan, and let me live with the fact that if something happens to you because of me, I won't come back from it. 3 weeks, she said, stunned by herself. We've known each other 3 weeks. Shurim. 3 weeks in which I died and you told me to breathe, he said. Time does not care about that kind of math. Her laugh was a small surrender. Your mother will think I'm a thief. My mother will adopt you and make you soup, he said. My uncle might think you're a thief. He thinks everyone is a thief who isn't him. Good to know where I stand, she said. And then, after another long breath, okay. He kissed her, not in triumph but in relief, and thought, not for the first time, that there are moments when a life breaks open. Some people spend money to make those moments. Some people jump into a river and earn them. The family summit happened the next morning with the precision of an emergency board meeting. Althea arrived first with a bag of food and regard. Nia came with spreadsheets and 3 lawyers' numbers already queued. Uncle Jonas Vale, who had loaned Malcolm his first rent check and never let him forget it, arrived with opinions he considered facts. Evelyn stood in the doorway until Malcolm reached back for her hand. He said her name and the room turned its head. Althea's smile erased 10 years of suspicion. Nia's nod was welcome written in CFO. Uncle Jonas took one look at Evelyn's borrowed hoodie in the absence of polish and said, So this is the plan now? Rescue a billionaire, move into his penthouse, rearrange his will? Jonas, Althea warned, a single word, a mother's knife. Evelyn spoke before Malcolm could. I didn't ask to move in. He asked me. I told him no twice. Then someone threatened me for being near him, and I told him yes because I am not brave enough to fight men with money by myself. Jonas folded arms that had held Malcolm when he was 10 and too tall for comfort. Men with money are not the only danger. You want a life of cameras and death threats and being hated by people you'll never meet? No, Evelyn said. I want him. The human part, not the headline. If that comes with the rest, I'll make a list. The room shifted a degree warmer. Jonas rolled his eyes to hide the way his mouth almost softened. Althea crossed to Evelyn and took her hand again. Baby, she said, if you want soup, say the word. Everything else is negotiable. The day the photo of Malcolm and Evelyn at the diner hit the feeds, the web split into its familiar tribes. Romantics, cynics, racists, defenders. Malcolm's PR team drafted 3 statements. He sent them back and wrote his own. I'm in a relationship with Evelyn Hart. She is not a storyline. She is a person who saved my life when she had every reason to keep walking. She deserves the dignity you would want for your sister, your mother, your friend. If you can't offer that, offer silence. It made things worse and better, as truth tends to do. That night on the balcony, Evelyn held the letter again, now inside Yara's evidence bag. I don't know how to do any of this, she admitted. I only know how to clean a room so thoroughly that no one who stays in it can tell I was ever there. You saved a life so thoroughly that everyone can tell, Malcolm said. Maybe we should build something that makes rooms safer for people who clean them. She considered him the way he used build like other people used wish. Like what? A foundation, he said, the word coming out like a stone tossed and tested. For workers like you were yesterday and like you are still, Housekeepers, dishwashers, home health aides, wages, training, legal defense, a hotline that picks up, emergency funds that don't require a novella of paperwork. You run it. Her laugh was a startled bird. I am not qualified to run anything that has a board. You are qualified to know what hurts and what helps, he said. We'll hire directors. You'll set priorities. You'll tell me when I'm being an idiot from 30 floors up. She looked at him over the rim of something that might have been love. You're serious. I am many terrible things, and he said, but I am not unserious about you. In the dark beyond the glass, the city breathed. Evelyn nodded. Okay, she said again, the word that had changed her life twice in 2 days. Let's make it matter. The Hardenvale Trust launched 8 weeks after the river. It began not with ribbon cutting, but with an announcement in a union hall in Queens that smelled like coffee and resolve. Housekeepers from hotels in uniform tops and jeans. Dishwashers with wrecked knuckles. A nanny with a toddler on her lap. A janitor just off a night shift, his eyes raw. The press showed because Malcolm was there. They stayed because Evelyn stepped to the microphone and did not waste a word. My name is Evelyn Hart, she said, refusing a podium as if it might elevate her away from the people she was talking to. I cleaned rooms and terraces and kitchens you'll never be invited to. I've been invisible in spaces I made livable. 2 months ago, I jumped into a river because I heard a splash that sounded wrong. I don't want my story to be extraordinary. I want the ordinary stories to be safe. She laid out the work like a floor plan. Grants to local legal clinics to take wage theft cases. Scholarships for the children of service workers that didn't require 27 forms and a blessing. A pilot program to place panic buttons in hotel rooms where women fear the men they're paid to serve. An emergency fund dispersed in hours, not weeks. We're not asking for charity, she said at the end, voice steady. We're reminding people of their obligations. It should have been a feel-good story. It became a battlefield. A cable network invited Malcolm on to discuss his pivot to philanthropy in a tone that turned the word into an alibi. He said yes because he was done letting other people narrate his motives. The host smiled with too many teeth. Critics say you're overcorrecting, she said, that your relationship has softened you. Being loved makes most people better, Malcolm said. If that's a problem, we should have a different conversation. Memes sprouted like mushrooms after rain. Gold digger jokes, interracial bile dressed up as economic debate. A photo of Evelyn in scrubs became a before in a million lazy narratives that assumed after meant she'd thrown away the part of her life that made the men on the internet uncomfortable. Evelyn's mother called, the tone on the line as familiar as wallpaper from a childhood kitchen. You're trending, baby, she said, somewhere between awe and accusation. I don't know whether to pray or ground you. Maybe both, Evelyn said. She didn't mention the letters from strangers that she read with a box of tissues. Housekeepers who said they'd never heard their work described as skill. A man who scrubbed an office floor at midnight and wrote that he cried in the supply closet, just knowing someone in a penthouse knew his name. Not everyone in Malcolm's universe applauded. In the glassy halls where deals clinked like ice and men laughed like they'd been promised tomorrow, a rival CEO approached Malcolm with the look of someone who equated sincerity with amateur hour. You're making a mistake, and he said. You date the help thinks they're family. You pay the help thinks they're partners. The next thing you know, you've taught your enemies how to use you. Malcolm smiled without showing teeth. Good to see you too, Brian. You've always been smarter than this, Brian Porter said. What changed? I stopped pretending. The people who made my life easy don't bleed when they're cut, Malcolm said. You should try it. You might stop bleeding people for sport. A waiter passing by tried not to smirk. Someone posted the exchange to a service worker subreddit. It went everywhere within the hour. Malcolm didn't care. The point wasn't that he'd won a quip. The point was that a man in a starched shirt who got yelled at for breathing too close to rich appetites had watched a billionaire take his side in public. Detective Keene continued to peel the onion of who and why. His board at the precinct looked like obsession. Shells connected by string, faces circled, dates underlined, arrows tracing money that acted like water, finding every low point and refusing to be contained. He called Nia at 2 a.m. more than once. She answered every time and learned the names of the secretaries on Keen's floor. "We're down to 5 candidates who could have ordered the grab," he told Malcolm one afternoon in a conference room Yara had swept 3 times. 3 competitors with motive but not the stomach, 1 ex with the stomach but not the motive, and 1 family member with both. Silence is a sound. "Who?" Malcolm asked, breath shortened by a different kind of cold. "Your cousin," Keen said. "Kellen Vale." Nia swore in a language she reserved for board coups. "That's not a name you say to my mother unless you're holding proof." Keen slid a folder across the table. Communications between Kellen and Trevor Ellis. Cash transfers that did not exist until Keen made them exist with subpoenas and threat and stubbornness. A gambling ledger that read like a confession and a suicide note at once. "He meant to kidnap you," Keen said. "Hold you for ransom." The line about billions down the drain was showboating. The plan went sideways. Panic, a struggle, the river. Then your cousin hired someone to erase the evidence he'd hired the first someone's. Malcolm stared at his cousin's name until it blurred. They had traded shoes as boys when neither had a pair that fit. They had skipped stones off the Passaic and then pretended their wrists were not sore from throwing the wrong way. Kellen had been the first to clap when Malcolm signed the lease on an office that smelled like ambition and paint. He had also been the first to ask for money without looking like he was asking for money. "I told him no," Malcolm said, the memory now await with definition. He wanted seed for a sports analytics startup that was 6 buzzwords and a demo from someone else's deck. "I offered rehab for the gambling. He called me sanctimonious." "What do you want to do?" Nia asked, softer than a CFO, harder than a sister, both. "Nothing," Malcolm said, and the word didn't mean what it usually does. "Keen will do. We'll let the proof do the part of love that hurts." They arrested Kellen outside a club built to look like a secret. Cameras loved him for all the wrong reasons. He tried to run, then tried to smile, then tried to become the boy who skipped stones. Keen didn't care for any of the versions. He read the charges and put Kellen into a back seat that did not belong to people who make mistakes, only to people who choose them. Althea came to Malcolm's apartment so quickly that it meant she'd left a pot on the stove and a prayer half-spoken. Evelyn met her at the door. Althea didn't ask to sit. She sat. She didn't ask if he was all right. Mothers know when all right is a lie that lets other people leave the room. "Kellen," she said, as if saying the name could be another kind of arrest. "Gambling," Malcolm said. "Debt. Entitlement dressed as need. He thought he could turn me into an ATM with a hostage clause." Althea pinched the bridge of her nose, the gesture summoning the headache that becomes a decade. "His father will die in stages." "Uncle Jonas already thinks I betrayed blood," Malcolm said, "because I said yes to justice." "Oh." "You said yes to living," Althea said. She reached for Evelyn's hand as if to confirm the things she had been thanking since the river. "When men drown, it's never just water." The arraignment produced the spectacle everyone expected. Kellen in a suit that tried to remember a different size for a different life. A lawyer whose voice could emulsify liquor and bile. Keen with the patience of a man who doesn't count, wins until the paperwork is filed. Malcolm kept his distance and did not make speeches. Evelyn held his hand in a courthouse hallway that smelled like old arguments. Nia sat on the other side like infantry. Kellen's eyes found Malcolm's as officers led him away. For a second, time did that terrible trick where it swaps bodies and ages. Malcolm saw the boy in the man. He refused to forgive the man with the boy's face. That night, Malcolm couldn't sit. He paced the penthouse, the view a map of everything that had almost ended. "I don't know how to hold 2 truths," he said finally, stopping with his palms on the kitchen island. "That my cousin taught me to ride a bike, and that he tied a rope around my ankles." "You don't have to hold them," Evelyn said, passing him a glass of water he didn't want, and drinking half of it herself to make him drink the rest. "You can set one down and call it past. You can set the other down and call it a warning." "I miss the before," he said, "before I knew the shape of certain people." "Before you knew mine," she said softly, reminding him that love is always an introduction to terror and wonder. "Before I knew yours." He looked at her like gravity was a choice. "Do you want out?" "I want in," she said, "into the worst parts and the best. Into the rooms where your hands shake and the ones where you pretend your hands never shook. He kissed her like an answer. The city glowed as if someone had turned up the dimmer switch on possibility. In the morning, the papers would take their cuts, and the markets would do their little dance, and a man who had almost died would go to a staff meeting and say the word foundation as if it were a product launch. But here, in a room that had learned the names of their footsteps, two people rested their foreheads together and built a small country neither had known how to find. The next weeks were work shaped like hope. Evelyn hired people who made her feel both out of her depth and perfectly placed. A director who knew the labyrinth where wage theft cases go to be lost. A counselor who had sat with too many women who knew the inside of hotel rooms too well. A program manager who called himself a translator because he turned initiative into bus pass, deliverable into rent paid, stakeholder into boyfriend stopped hitting me because a lawyer called his probation officer. At one launch event, a woman in a housekeeping uniform approached Evelyn with a shy, fierce smile. "I'm Maya," she said. "I clean the W on State Street. I didn't think people like you saw people like me." Evelyn laughed because the sentence was a magic trick that cut her in half. "People like me," she said, "are people like you. The only difference is where someone told us to stand." The internet kept doing what the internet does. Some nights Evelyn waded in and regretted it. Some nights she stayed out and regretted it. Malcolm learned how to stand between her and the screen and say, "This isn't oxygen." He learned that kale juice does not cure despair and that the correct number of hugs is always one more than the one you've given. On their 3-month anniversary, the kind you don't mark with a gift, but with a smile you both understand, Malcolm took Evelyn back to the water. "Why are we here?" she asked, stopping at the rail as if the river might flash teeth. The dock had been repaired. The pilings still remembered. "Because this is where the lie we were living drowned," he said, "and where the truth we're building started breathing." He dropped to one knee. He didn't do it because tradition told him to. He did it because sometimes the body needs choreography to tell the heart this moment is different. "Evelyn Hart," he said, with the voice he used in boardrooms, stripped of every trick. "Will you marry me?" She stared at the ring, elegant without apology, and then at him, and reached for him like he was the thing that would keep her from falling into the old story about girls from nowhere and men from too much. "Yes," she said, not like an explosion, but like an arrival. "Yes." He slid the ring on. She kissed him. Somewhere in the distance, a barge sounded its horn like a blessing that didn't need to know what it was blessing. They married on a day that felt like weather had finally negotiated with joy. Not in a ballroom with ceilings that made people feel small. On the lawn at Riverside Manor, within shouting distance of a dock where people had once done evil and a woman had refused to let it stand. The guest list looked like a city if a city knew how to tell the truth about itself. CEOs in spines that forgot how to bend. Line cooks with hands scrubbed raw for the occasion. A senator who had voted for something that mattered last week, and a janitor who'd held the elevator when her aides carried too many binders. Althea cried as if tears were currency and she had saved for years. Jonas stood arms crossed and smiling anyway. Nia smiled like a sister who had carried too many spreadsheets and would carry 10 more. The vows were not performance, they were policy. "I promise to remember the man in the river when the headlines try to turn you into an argument," Evelyn said. "I promise to make rooms safe for people who enter them with keys that don't fit their names on the door. I promise to use what I have to build the things you see that I miss," Malcolm said. "I promise to listen when you tell me I'm wrong and love you even when you are, and never let anyone make you small so that I can feel big." Pastor Faye Michael, who had the laugh of a woman who knows how to shout joy into rooms that forgot they could hold it, blessed them without making it precious. "You were strangers on a night that could have been a funeral," she said. "You did not choose the river. You chose each other. Keep choosing." They ate food that tasted like it had been cooked by someone who wanted them to live long enough to remember it. The band played songs your aunt knew by heart and your niece put on TikTok later. Malcolm danced with Althea. Evelyn danced with Nia. Jonas danced with an old neighbor who used to lend Malcolm his newspaper when the delivery kid forgot the third floor. The day after, the work didn't pause to admire their rings. The Trust launched a living wage campaign that partnered with 5 mid-range hotel chains who valued PR and discovered morals along the way. Evelyn testified before a state committee on a bill to protect housekeepers from predatory scheduling practices. She spoke plainly, like she was talking to a friend at a bus stop with 3 minutes before the bus came. The clip went viral not because she cried, she didn't, but because a legislator asked a question that stank of condescension, and Evelyn looked at him like a man who had never made a bed tight enough to bounce a coin, then taught him how people live. Malcolm shifted Vail systems in ways that made some shareholders twitch and others exhale. He greenlit a product that let hourly workers track their hours in a way that made theft harder and proof easier. He canceled a partnership with a company that used contractor status as a weapon and did it on a call where he said, "Our margin cannot be built from someone else's blood." Then pushed mute and let Keene text him a thumbs up, because yes, the detective had become the kind of friend who watches live streams en routes. People kept testing them. A columnist wrote that Evelyn was performing virtue with borrowed wealth. A tech bro wrote that Malcolm had abandoned the ruthless excellence that built Vail. The Bros Company, which had never been profitable, folded 2 quarters later. The columnist found a new target when a pop star shaved her head. Evelyn's father's old friend, a man who used to fix outboard motors with hands that smelled like gasoline and kindness, wrote a letter in ink that smudged a little. He said, "I watched your wedding on a phone someone showed me. Your dad would have stood up and shouted. He would have told everyone at the VFW your story even if they already knew it. He would have looked at Malcolm and said, 'You better take care of my girl,' and then hugged him before the man could answer." P.R. Your mom cried at the video. She told me to tell you she cries at everything now. She's proud. She doesn't know how to say it without crying. Evelyn folded the letter and tucked it into a book on the nightstand, between a page she wanted to reread and a line that reminded her of a doc. She leaned against Malcolm on the couch while the city did its light show and said, "I can do 3 more hearings if you make coffee tomorrow." "I will make coffee until the end of days," he said, "but I will burn the bagels. We have to accept that this is who I am." She kissed his shoulder. "I accept your flaws. I also accept that you buy better bagels than the ones we grew up with." He laughed and then sobered, then told her the thing he had been carrying and hadn't found an elegant box for. "Sometimes I'm afraid I'm making you a target you didn't ask to be." "You didn't make me anything," she said. "The men who threw you off a dock made us targets. Your cousin made us targets. The world that thinks love is a lottery ticket makes us targets. You made me visible to myself." "Marry me again," he blurted, useless and perfect. "We are married," she said, laughing. "Marry me again every morning," he said. "Deal," she said, "but you still burn the bagels." They went back to Riverside sometimes, not because they liked to haunt the place that almost ended them, but because that's where their new life began, and beginnings deserve revisiting. They stood at the rail and watched the water that never remembers you back. They talked about the first phone call from a woman in Reno who'd gotten her wages after 6 months because the Hart and Vale lawyer wrote a letter that sounded like a storm. They talked about the emergency fund that had paid a week of motel nights for a mother whose landlord locked her out because the baby cried and the neighbors complained. They talked about board fights and budget fights and the small victory of a man who stopped yelling at his nanny when he realized the app he used to track her hours had a legal department attached to it now. At a gala where the guest list looked like a stock portfolio and the theme was benevolence, Malcolm overheard a conversation he'd expected and still resented. He used to be hungry, a VC in a suit that cost what a forgiving church tithe yield said. Now he's moral. "Maybe morality is a different kind of hunger," Malcolm said, stepping into the circle that assumed he was part of the architecture, not the conversation. "The kind that doesn't leave you empty when you've eaten." "What about returns?" the man said, smiling because he believed the word a talisman. "Ask my retention rate," Malcolm said. "Ask the engineers who left your shop for mine, because they're tired of building the next slot machine for attention. We're not poor because we stopped pretending extraction is innovation." The man laughed the way people laugh when they're not sure whether they're losing. Evelyn slid her hand into Malcolm's and squeezed twice. "I see you," it said. "Keep going," it said. A year after the river, they marked the day not with champagne in a rooftop bar, but with an 8 a.m. staff meeting at the Trust and a 10 a.m. visit to a worker center in the Bronx, where a group of women had organized to make a hotel install peepholes in the doors The guests couldn't lock from the inside. The women presented Evelyn with a framed photo, all of them in their uniforms, fists cocked and laughing, a handmade sign behind them that said, "We are not invisible," in marker that bled into the poster board. Evelyn cried in a bathroom with bad lighting. Malcolm waited outside the door like a wall. When she came out, eyes red and shining, she said, "I thought jumping in was the brave part. Turns out staying is." "We are very brave," he said, mock formal, then serious. "We are also very lucky. Those two are cousins I want to keep inviting to dinner." "Speaking of," she said, wiping her cheeks and smiling, "we are due at your mother's. She made soup." "She made soup 2 days ago," he said. "She made more soup," she said, and he accepted that he would eat soup until the end of days, and that this too was a blessing. That night on Althea's couch, Jonas snored during a documentary about jazz and redemption. Nia argued with a cable news anchor in a box she couldn't hear, and Althea showed Evelyn a photo of Malcolm at 13 with a haircut that should be a federal offense. Evelyn laughed so hard she had to set down her tea. Malcolm feigned outrage and surrendered. Family, messy and mended in places, lived in that room like the truth it is, chosen, complicated, and most precious when it is loud. Later on their balcony, the city a quilt of light and shadow, they talked about the next thing. Not a bigger thing, a deeper thing. A program for immigrants who clean offices at night and go to ESL in the day. A partnership with a tech school to train hotel housekeepers who want to become building engineers. A back-to-school drive that didn't feel like a photo op, but felt like the quiet relief of a receipt that says paid. "Do you ever get tired?" Evelyn asked, leaning into him until their bones agreed on a posture. "Yes," he said. "And then I remember the river." "I remember your face," she said, "right after. When you didn't know whether to be relieved or afraid, you picked relieved. We've been unafraid since." "Not unafraid," he said. "Afraid and choosing anyway." She nodded, hair catching the light. "Choosing anyway is how we got here." He thought of Kellen, of the boys they had been, and the men they had become, of the choice that had turned one of them into a cautionary tale and the other into a man who knew the exact sound of a woman's voice when she commanded him to live. He sent a small prayer to the version of himself who had thought he could outrun the need for other people. He told that version, "Thank you for dying," without taking the rest of him down. "Tell me again," Evelyn said, "because some sentences are fuel, and you need them refilled often." "I love you," he said. "I love the way you look at a room and see the corners no one cleans. I love the way you make lawmakers feel like students who should have done the reading. I love the way you kept my heart from closing when it was easier to be angry. I love the way you jumped and the way you stayed." She kissed him, and the city kept its noise to itself for a minute, respectful of a different kind of ceremony. Down below, a delivery driver parallel parked like a god. Across the river, a barge pushed the dark aside. Above, a plane cut a white line toward a future someone would land and call ordinary. In an office downtown, a young woman named Maya, whose tweet once made Evelyn cry, and who now ran a scholarship fund the trust had matched, stayed late to finish an application for a housekeeper's daughter. She wrote, "In this house, we no longer apologize for the volume of our dreams." In a hotel on the highway, a night auditor who played drums on weekends flipped the switch on a new system that didn't allow the manager to shave 15 minutes from everybody's clock. In a kitchen that had never seen a billionaire, a man who washed pans until his hands split, bought his kid a trumpet on layaway, and didn't feel guilty for the first time in a year. Rivers don't keep secrets. They carry them. The Hudson carried a story from a dock to a city, and from the city to a country, and from the country to 1,000 rooms where people who make beds and meals and futures understood that someone had said their names into a microphone that didn't distort them. Malcolm and Evelyn went to bed early because bravery also needs sleep. Before she closed her eyes, she turned a ring and watched it catch the city's afterglow. "What's tomorrow?" she asked, the question that builds a life. "Coffee," he said. "Soup at my mother's. A budget meeting you'll hate. A call with a hotel chain will make better or angrier. Dinner on the couch. Bagels I will burn." "Bagels you will not burn," she corrected, and then softer. "A life we will keep choosing." He kissed her forehead. "A life we will keep choosing." The river moved in the dark, relentless and unchanged by the human drama on its banks. It had tried to keep him. It had failed. It had returned him to a woman who decided strangers are worth her breath, and a family that decided blood is not an alibi, and a city that decided to listen to voices it had filed under background. The water slid by like time, leaving them with what they needed to do, what love decides to do when it's worth more than money. Stay, build, insist, forgive sometimes, never forget, and choose again.